Hello friends, in the last video I had mentioned about the 5 different types of questions which are asked during a personal interview. Now today in this video, let us go deeply into the first of the 5 types, which are personal questions. Can't stress enough the importance of personal questions in an interview where the faculty is trying to find the person that you are. They want to know more about you, the kind of person you are, what kind of attitude do you have to life in general, to people around you, to situations, life situations that happen with you. Are you a person who is very positive, somebody who can motivate people, who can organize things, contribute in general to the environment or the situations which are happening around you? Or are you a negative kind of a person, somebody who is very cynical? Now, while doing these personal questions, the interview panel can try and put you under a bit of pressure, which happens not just for personal questions, but also for the other kinds of questions, because they want to see how you react to pressure situations. Are you a person who is a positive influence, not just during the 2 years at the B school, but also during the years beyond in your career, where you contribute to the growth of the organization? So in order to present yourself very well, you need to go into every detail of the form that you have already submitted to the B school. Scrutinize the form from A to Z, what you have written, and prepare on each aspect on all kinds of possible questions. So let us start with your name. For example, say your name is Ravindra Dhawan. So they can ask you, what is the meaning of Dhawan? Can you tell us names of famous personalities who share the same name as you? So you might say Ravindranath Tagore or Ravindra Jain, the musician, or Ravindra Jadeja, the cricketer, and so on. They might ask you, do you have anything in common with any of them, any particular aspects? What is your family name? Maybe you carry your father's or mother's name along with your name. So then they might ask you, like, why do you carry, for example, your father's name? Why not your mother's name? So you might reply by saying that that's the tradition in the family. So what does that signify? They're again trying to put you under pressure. So you need to be clear about all aspects relating to your personality, particularly what you have written in the form that you have submitted to the institute, because that sometimes forms the base on which they are going to start asking questions. Another possible question is, what are your strengths? Or they might ask you, what are your skills? So you might say, I make friends very easily. I'm a person who can get along well with people. I'm a team player. So they would, on all these aspects, ask you to substantiate. So you should have at least 3 stories to substantiate each strength or skill that you're actually putting forward to the interview panel. Why 3? Because maybe you mention one example. They're going to ask you, like, give me an example. And you mention one example, they might ask you, tell us something more, or give us one more example. And you should be ready for that. So on each of these aspects that you're putting forward as your strength, please prepare at least on 3 stories, 3 examples, which you can quote. While you're quoting, be very, very brief. Mention that aspect in 1 or 2 sentences if asked. Try and connect to management skills because you're going into a B school. For example, you might say you have the ability to multitask, which is a very good skill for a manager. Then they can come back to you saying, does it mean that you're confused about what to prioritize? Does it mean that you don't concentrate on a particular thing? You try and jumble up yourself by trying to do too many things at the same time. They're only trying to see how you react to these kind of questions. You can say you have the ability to motivate people, you have the ability to plan things, you have the ability to innovate. For example, you can cite how you planned your college tour, for example, if you're a fresher, or you can talk about how you managed your intercollegiate festivals, what is your contribution, and then take examples from that to cite your strengths in certain facets of your personality. Again, things like, I have the ability to take failures in my stride, learn from them, and then improve as we go along. Again, on this, be careful about what kind of examples you give. I've seen students during mock interviews quote things like, sir, I had 5 back papers in college and I took them in my stride and prepared well and cleared all of them. So you're then giving a stick to the interview panel to actually beat you. So be careful about what kind of examples you give to kind of substantiate your strength, your skills. Avoid bombastic sounding claims. For example, in the last video, I was mentioning about a student who walked into an interview, and when asked about his most important personality trait, he said, I have excess combustible energy. And the entire interview was on this particular word combustion, where the interview panel tried to pin him down. So when you're sitting in an interview, remember, you're not talking to equals. The interview panel, most of them would be a generation or more senior to you, and they're going to decide your selection process. So treat the interview panel with respect, and your language should be formal, polite, at the same time speak with a lot of clarity. While talking about your strengths, you might say, I'm disciplined, I'm punctual, I'm hardworking. Now, these are traits which are expected. So those are not something special. So those kind of strengths are something which are add-on. They are not your major strengths. Now, prepare on at least 4 to 5 strengths. Prepare on stories to substantiate them. Look at all kinds of questions that can come so that you're well prepared. Another question that you can expect is, how do your friends look at you? How do your parents look at you? What about your peer group at work? How do they judge you? How do they evaluate you? So think about the different kinds of roles that you play. For example, at home, you're playing a different role to your parents. With your friends, that's a separate role. In college, you again, sitting in class, play a different role. When you're organizing things, you're playing a different role. In organization, you're again playing different roles. Like, for example, you might be a mentor to somebody who has recently joined under you. At the same time, when you're actually interacting with your superior, you're playing a different role. With your peer group in a team, you're playing a different role. So look at all those things and bring up situations from your life which you can use to substantiate your strengths. For example, say you're a fresher and they ask you about your team skills, then you can cite examples from how you managed your intercollegiate festival, or say you participated in a intercollegiate fest and you were part of the dance team and how you actually performed and did very well. Maybe you did not win the particular competition, but you can then build up a story like, out of 22 teams, how you were in the final 3 to be shortlisted, and then the kind of work that you did together as a team and so on. So as a fresher, not necessary that you use only academic examples. Now, if you have work experience, then it's always better to draw on examples from your work life quite a lot, because that substantiates a lot of your management skills. Another question would be about your achievements. You can cite achievements from academics, arts, sports, literature, and so on. You can also talk about your contributions to society. For example, you organized a blood donation camp at college. You don't have a certificate to back that up, but then you feel that that is worth mentioning, that you can go ahead and state that. Maybe you are a part of a group which does things for the society, and as part of that, you have done mentoring of children going to different schools and talking to them about higher education. Talk about all those things. Maybe you took the lead to organize things in college or in your organization, like organizing heritage walks or nature walk, starting a photography club. So all those things you can mention. When you talk about your achievements, you can also take an emotional route. For example, you can say that when I was in, let's say, first standard, and I won a small prize for intra-school event, and I remember going up on stage and collecting that from the principal and the entire school clapping. I felt so happy inside me, and that spurred me on to do better in life with various activities. I've heard a student give an example of how he won a lemon and spoon race as a small kid, and he talked about how his father picked him up. He remembered that feeling with his father picking him up with the trophy in his hand, and he felt that that was the sign of success, which spurred me on to do much better in areas like arts and sports. That was his story. So if you're taking that route, you should again be able to substantiate with what you've done in your life beyond the example that you mentioned. Another possible question is, what are your weaknesses? We're all human, so we have weaknesses, personality related weaknesses, that is, and we should be prepared to at least mention a couple of them. While you mention your weaknesses, you should also be able to mention instances where that caused an issue and how you're trying to work on them and improve the situation. And if you can come up with a story of when you encountered such an issue the next time, how you performed much better. So it's a question of learning from your weaknesses and improving on them. Now, while you mention your weaknesses, be careful to tone them down. And if you're clever, you can use this question to turn it around and allude to your strengths. For example, if you say, sir, sometimes I tend to lose my patience just a bit with my teammates, particularly if they are my friends, if they are not able to meet their targets while you are working in a team. So you're saying that you tend to lose your patience a bit. You're trying to tone it down at times. Again, trying to tone it down. And then you're giving the example of working in a team where, particularly if some of them are your friends, then they should know the situation better and team up well with you. So you're then giving a reason why you lose your patience a bit. And the example says that when your team members are not able to meet the deadline, which indirectly then highlights the fact that you are a person who is always able to meet deadlines. You feel that is extremely important. So you're then using that particular question, talking about your weakness and then connecting that to a strength. Or you say that sometimes I tend to juggle with too many things at the same time. So suppose if I'm working on 3 different things, A, B, C, I'm not able to prioritize them. I tend to give equal time to all the 3, whereas, for example, A might be 80% important, whereas B and C would be 10%, 10% each. And then you say that I'm trying to improve, and again, if possible, try and come up with a story where you're now getting better at it. Maybe A is now 50% and the remaining 2 are 25% each kind of. Then you're giving a hint that you know about your weakness and you're working on it. And it's happening. Or an example like, I tend to empathize with people a bit too much. Again, you're qualifying that statement, isn't it? Now, empathizing with people is a very good trait. It's the strength. But here you're saying you empathize a bit too much. Again, they will ask you, why do you say that? Isn't empathy a good thing to have? And you're ready with examples, multiple examples again, where you say that sometimes people who know you well know how you would react to a sob story, and they might use that to take advantage of you, advantage of the situation. So you're trying to temper that weakness down. Another weakness could be, I find it very difficult to say no to people who are very close to me. That's a weakness that we all have, isn't it? So that's again something that you can say with again examples. So while mentioning weaknesses, 1, tone it down. 2, while giving examples, say how you are working on it, and if possible, give examples of how you have improved on it. Like the question, what are your biggest achievements in life? They can ask you, what are your biggest failures in life? So be ready with answers and talk about how you learned from your failures and improved as a person, as somebody who reacts to that kind of a situation. Because learning from failures is an extremely positive trait to have. And in fact, those people who face failures in life are people who tend to relate to such situations better as they go along in life. Another question would be, tell us a couple of reasons why we should not select you. Now you have prepared on all the wonderful reasons why the interview panel should select you to the B school. And here comes a question, why we should not select you. So again, talk about your weaknesses in relation to other candidates, that is. And also mention the fact that you have some very good qualities to offset them. So while they're talking about your negative factors which might impact the selection, end that sentence by talking about some of the positive things that you hope will override the kind of negatives that you have. So again, like the weaknesses we talked about, you're trying to connect this and turn it around to reach your positives. Go through the selection criteria of the B school. Now, the selection criteria could vary a bit from B school to B school. So go through the selection criteria and look at certain factors where you feel that you might be behind the others by a point or 2. And those are the kind of things that you should highlight. And of course, turn it around with the other aspects of the selection criteria where you feel you're good. Another possible question is about who are your role models or who is your role model? Now you can mention famous personalities who are either living or dead. You can mention multiple personalities even if they ask you who is your role model. You can still mention role models where most likely the panel is going to come back to you and focus on some of the weaknesses of the people you have mentioned. They're going to try and put you under pressure. And again, remember that all of them were as human as you are. So they also had their own negatives, and you are not responsible for their entire life. Not at all. So the easier thing to do if you are picking on famous personalities is to say that, sir, I look up to Mr. A, Mrs. B, or C, and you say that I like this particular trait X of A or Y of B and Z of C, instead of trying to say that I sort of adopt the entire person and try and fashion my life accordingly. So you're picking on certain traits from different individuals and saying that those are things which appeal to you. Now there is always an issue when you cite famous personalities because they're known personalities. The interviewers can come back and ask questions about them, about their weaknesses, about their negative traits. Again, you're not responsible for them, but still, you are under a bit of pressure trying to defend. For example, let us say you're citing a cricketer like Rahul Dravid or MS Dhoni. In the case of Dravid, they can come back to you, talk about his captaincy in the 2007 World Cup, how the team did not perform. So you can say that I admire Mr. Rahul Dravid for the wholesome kind of contribution that is made to Indian cricket by providing a kind of system for the development of the youngsters by mentoring the under 19 team or the India A team, providing selfless kind of service, while a lot of the other ex-cricketers of his times moved into more publicity oriented, much more financially rewarding kind of careers and things like that. So you're actually taking one particular aspect of Dravid and citing that. If you're mentioning, say, MS Dhoni and you talk about his captaincy, and recently one of my students mentioned that in an interview, the interview panel then came back to him and said, what do you like about his captaincy? And he said he always has a plan B. So the immediate question from the interview panel is, what is your plan B if you don't get selected? And that's a very common question during an interview. While you talk about your passion for doing management, they can definitely come back to you and ask you, like, what if you are not selected? What is your alternate career plan? So you can't say that I have only management in mind. You have a secondary career plan as a backup. You'll say that I'll still try again to get into management because that is my first and biggest passion. But you have a second backup kind of an option, which is related to your hobbies or interests or extracurricular activities. Something which you feel can be built and made into a career. The safest route to take while talking about role models is to talk about your family members, your friends, somebody who has actually inspired you. Again, you can cite multiple people. You can talk about your father, mother, uncle, your mentor in college or mentor at the workplace. Here the advantage is that the interview panel doesn't know them. So they have to sit back and listen to some of the things that you're mentioning. Of course, they can still pick on the things that you're saying, but that is solely based on what you say and how you present the fact that why they are your role models, what kind of impact they have made on you, and how it has shaped your personality. Another question is about your hobbies, interests, extracurricular activities. Mention things which you are generally involved in as a day-to-day activity, or it can be often. Now, when you talk about hobbies, they can be passive hobbies and they can be active hobbies. So focus on the active hobbies. What I'm saying is, watching cricket is a passive hobby, playing cricket is an active hobby. So give a lot of focus on active hobbies that you have. Need not be earth-shaking things like reading or stamp collection or whatever. It can be simple things. You can also talk about hobbies that you want to take up in future. You can add on by saying that also. They might ask you how these hobbies are helping you as a person. For example, in an interview, a candidate who was pursuing karate as a passion was asked about how it helped him in his life, and he was talking about how karate helped him manage his physique and, more importantly, his mind while dealing with situations. A person who said my hobby is playing the tabla was asked about what is the percussion instrument, why do they use a hammer and keep knocking at the side of the tabla before the performance or in between the performance. What are the kind of material which the top of the tabla is made of, and why do we have a round at the center of the tabla, and what is that material made of? Another student during an interview mentioned that he plays the guitar, so they're talking about how many strings and what is the material that it's made of, and then they talk about different types of guitars, what is a Spanish guitar, what is the difference, what is an electric guitar, where do you position yourself during a performance when you're doing a kind of a concert or part of a band, how are the other instrumentalists positioned on stage. They're just trying to check out whether what you're saying is true. And I had this very interesting story of a person who went to an IIM interview and talked about his hobby, which is making wax models. He was asked how he picked up that as a hobby, and he mentioned that when he was in school, he had a Bengali family staying next door, and they taught him how to do this because they were actually making these things at home, particularly for puja. He went on to say that when the Bengali family then shifted out later on, they left a few molds with him, and he started using that to make more wax models, and then he built on that particular passion and so on. And they asked him questions about the wax which is used, the kind of coloring which was done, the colors which were added, and all those kind of questions. And he answered all of them perfectly well. So when the student came back from the interview and gave me an interview feedback, and I listened to this, I was quite impressed, and I said, "Oh, your hobby is different, looks interesting." And he said, "Sir, I made it up. The part about the Bengali family being next door and making wax models were all fine. I watched them do that, but I never got into it myself." So here is a person who actually cleverly used that. I'm not saying that you should fib, but what I'm trying to say is the fact that he prepared on all possible kinds of questions that could come his way. So that is the point I'm trying to make, where on all aspects of your personality, you should be prepared for the different types of questions that can arise. Keep in mind that while you're talking about your hobbies and extracurricular activities, sometimes you may not have a certificate to back it up. For example, you do heritage walks, you organize nature walks, you have been part of a flood relief operation. You don't have a certificate to back it up, but there are certain things that you have actually done and you mention them. If you regularly do things which connect to the society, and you do things for support for the underprivileged, that's again a very positive thing. Another popular question is regarding your values, your family values. What has your family taught you? So you can talk about how the value of education is something that the family really upholds as priceless, and talk about the family talk to you about respect for people in the society, how to connect to people in the society the right way, behavioral habits, and all those kind of things. How it helped you to mold your personality the right way. There could be questions about ethics. In some of the forms given by B schools, there are questions about tell us about an ethical dilemma that you faced in life. So always while answering questions related to ethics, values, morals, you should cite answers, examples which are on the right side of the Lakshman Rekha. There are certain rules, norms, value systems which are laid down in the society. For example, in college, you have certain rules and norms to be followed. In organizations, be it companies, be it cultural organizations or whatever, again, you have certain norms which are followed, certain rules which are specified. So always try and play it very, very safe. Now here is the catch, because the interview panel would be from a different generation, and as we know, things have really shifted and a lot of liberalism has come into play today. But again, play it down. See, once you are selected, what's your objective? Your objective is to say the right things the right way and get selected, isn't it? Once you're selected, once you're in college, then you can be yourself. I mean, what happens then, that's a different story. But what I'm trying to say is that say things, present yourself the best possible way with the objective of getting selected, period. That is what you have in mind when you answer questions. I had this interesting example while doing a mock interview where while we were talking about reacting to situations and involving ethics, a student talked about how being a editor of the college magazine, he reacted to certain things from the side of the college management and the principal, which he said were not student friendly. So the students were not in agreement with what was happening in the college. So he then mentioned about how the college magazine came out with a thick black border and a caricature at the center, putting down the management and their activities. Now, we can understand the kind of angst on the part of the student community, and most likely they were justified also. But remember, here you're talking to college professors in an interview, isn't it? So how would this case look like before them? And maybe they would understand, they would empathize with you, but then do you want to take a chance with this kind of an example? That is the question. So while you might be trying to mention about your personality, how strong it is, reacting to atrocities or unacceptable things in the society and fighting them and all those kind of things, the kind of example might not, I'm not saying will not, I'm just saying it might not go down well with the interview panel. So you need to look at it from their perspective, because the perspective that you have from your side of the interview table might be different from the perspective that the interview panel has from the other side of the table, and that is the perspective which will finally affect your selection. In most of the B schools, during the first term, they have a paper called Ethics in Business. If you look at their website also, they talk about ethics and values in their vision and mission statements. So this is something that you need to be aware of and come up with the right answers. For example, they can give you situations and see how you react. Say you are an export executive in a multinational organization and you are put in charge of a particular shipment which is leaving the port tomorrow. It has to leave latest by tomorrow. And your success, your efficiency depends on the movement of the cargo latest by tomorrow. And here is a situation where the customs officer at the port is asking for a bribe. Only if you give the bribe, the shipment will be cleared and the cargo will move tomorrow. What will you do? So you would say no, and you should always say no, whatever be the pressure which is put on you. So they'll then say that your job is under stress, you might lose your job, because ultimately isn't the objective which is more important. The cargo has to move. Look at the company, look at the reputation. What if the customer does not get the cargo on time? Look at their loss and all those kind of things. They'll put that kind of pressure on you. And while they keep piling on you the pressure, you stand your ground and say, no sir, my personal value systems do not allow that. And so also the company has a very clean policy about ethics and bribes and values. Now suppose they again say your boss is telling you to give the bribe, the company is lenient on this particular issue. Again you say, sir, I'm sorry, but my personal value systems do not agree to this. See, they are giving you a fictitious situation. They might say you're going to lose your job and all. This is a make-believe kind of situation. So you can happily stick to your ground and say no. They can ask you questions like, what is a typical day in your life? What do you do on a normal day? You say you browse. Then what do you browse? What do you read? How do you chill with friends? What is the latest movie that you have watched? Why did you like the movie? Why did you not like the movie? What if you win a crore of rupees today? How will you spend it? So they're just trying to put you under various situations and see how you react. You should know about the work that your parents are doing, your siblings are doing. Say your father is working in the bank, then they can ask you questions not just about that particular bank, but generally about the banking situation in India. Say your mother is a college lecturer, and then they'll ask you what subject she teaches. Do you like that subject? Why don't you like that subject? Your mother is teaching that, and why don't you like that subject? Would you like to go into academics like your mother? So prepare on the organization where your parents, siblings are working. Also look at the possible kind of questions that you might get. Say your parents are engineers or doctors, for example, or lawyers. Why don't you pick up the same career? Why did you turn to management? Say one of your parents is working in ISRO, then you should know about what are their latest plans, what about the manned mission, what are the next launch coming up. So you should be aware about the kind of things that your family members are involved with. While answering questions, in between the panel can ask you like, did you take coaching for appearing for interviews? And you say yes. So these are rehearsed answers, isn't it? These are answers which were supplied by the coaching institutes, isn't it? Now, taking coaching is absolutely fine because that is a training ground for you to prepare very well. And that actually shows that you're very keen on this. You badly want to get into the institute, isn't it? We all go through training programs. So coaching is like a training program. When you join an organization, you are put through training program, isn't it? When you join the army, again, let's say you go through NDA and then join the army. So this is a training ground and it helps you to prepare very well for the interview. The answers are your answers. So be very specific about answering that part of the question. You say that they definitely told you about the do's and don'ts of how to crack an interview, how to be at your best during an interview. But the answers that you have come up with are your own answers, which you have prepared on, put a lot of thought into, and tried to personalize. So friends, we have looked at a whole range of personal questions. So in the next video, we will look at career-related questions. So till we meet again, take care. Appreciate your time. Hope my insights were valuable and you benefit from my expertise. Catch the next video in our GD Interview Mastery Series for MBA aspirants. The link is in the description. Stay tuned for more success tips.